I woke up that morning to the sound of birds screaming louder than usual. Spring here is always loud, but that day something felt different. I stretched my back, pushed the old screen door open, and stepped onto the porch, rubbing my eyes from the bright sun. And then I froze. She was standing right there. A lynx. Her fur was wet with morning dew, and her shoulders were shaking with each silent sob. At first, I thought she was growling, but then I heard it, a thin, painful whine coming from the small bundle by her front paws. I could barely breathe. My pulse pounded so hard it made my ears ring. This wild creature, a queen of these forests, was looking straight at me with eyes full of terror and something else I never thought I'd see in a lynx: desperate hope. She pushed the tiny body forward. The cub was limp. Its head rolled unnaturally, and its breathing was shallow, almost invisible. I felt a tightness in my chest that made it hard to swallow. I wanted to run back inside, close the door, pretend this wasn't happening. But those eyes held me frozen in place. I took one cautious step forward. The lynx flinched, her ears flattening, but she didn't move away. I knelt down slowly, keeping my hands visible. Years ago, I had been a vet, but this wasn't a pet cat brought in for shots. This was a wild lynx mother, risking everything to come to me. I whispered softly, hoping my voice would calm her trembling. She was crying, shaking so hard her fur rippled with each breath. Tears burned my own eyes as I reached out and brushed my fingers against the cub's tiny paw. It was cold, too cold. My mind raced. Was it poisoned? Injured? Starved? I didn't know yet. But if I hesitated, I knew what would happen. I looked back into her eyes. Her chest heaved. She shifted her weight anxiously, but she never broke eye contact. I gathered the cub in my hands, feeling its ribcage flutter like a trapped bird under my fingertips. Its fur was patchy and damp, and I could smell sickness, that sour, metallic scent of death creeping close. For a moment, the mother growled low in her throat, her muscles tightening. I thought she might slash my face open right there, but instead she lowered her head and pressed her nose to my wrist, as if giving her blessing. I stood up, cradling the cub against my chest. I could feel its bones through its thin skin. My heart broke right there on that porch. I whispered to her, "I'll do my best. I promise you." She watched me walk back toward the cabin, her ears flicking nervously. I didn't know if she would follow me inside or tear the door off its hinges if I closed it. But when I glanced back, she just lay down right there on the porch, her golden eyes never leaving the tiny body in my hands. I stepped inside, feeling the warmth of the cub against me, so faint it was almost not there. I kicked the door shut behind me and looked down at it. The little lynx twitched weakly. I took a deep breath. This wasn't a rescue I ever planned for. And standing in my old kitchen, holding that dying cub, I realized something that sent chills down my spine. If I failed, I wouldn't just watch this little one die. I would watch her mother's heart break in front of me. I laid the little lynx down on a folded towel on my kitchen table. Its breathing was ragged. Each inhale so quiet I had to lean down to be sure it was still alive. My hands trembled as I checked its gums, pale, almost white. I ran my fingers along its tiny ribs, feeling every bone. Starvation, severe dehydration, weak pulse, but no broken limbs or visible wounds. I heard scratching behind me. The mother lynx was at the screen door, pacing back and forth, her tail flicking in sharp jerks. Every time I moved, she let out a low rumble, a warning I didn't need reminding of. Her golden eyes tracked my every move. I filled a syringe with warm electrolyte solution, kneeling down to hold the cub steady. Its mouth barely opened as I dripped the fluid onto its tongue. "Come on, little one. Swallow for me. Just a little." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a weak twitch of its throat. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. "Good. That's good. Keep going." The mother growled again, louder this time. I turned and held up my hand. "Easy, girl. I'm helping. I promise." She pressed her nose against the mesh of the door, whining so softly it broke my heart all over again. As I worked, memories I tried to bury clawed their way back. Years ago, before I came out here, I was a veterinarian in Denver. Long shifts, busy clinic, families trusting me with their pets. One winter morning, I woke up and my world was gone. My wife, Marissa, and our daughter, Chloe, killed by a drunk driver on their way to school. I left everything. The house, the clinic, friends. I couldn't stand the sympathy in their eyes. I bought this cabin with the insurance money and disappeared into the pines. For a long time, I thought I'd never use my skills again. I didn't want to. Helping animals reminded me too much of all the life I couldn't save. But now, with this cub trembling under my fingers, I felt something stirring in my chest I thought was dead. Purpose. The lynx outside let out a sharp yowl that made me flinch, the syringe slipping from my hand and clattering to the floor. I cursed under my breath, grabbing it quickly. The cub's eyes fluttered open, glazed and unfocused, then rolled back as it let out a tiny rasping cry. It was fighting. Barely, but it was fighting. I mixed up a second dose of fluids with glucose and injected it under the loose skin at the back of its neck. The cub twitched in pain, letting out a kitten-like squeak. The mother let out a savage snarl, pressing her paws against the screen so hard I thought it might rip off its hinges. I turned to her, feeling tears burn hot in my eyes. I know it hurts. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. She quieted, breathing hard, her chest rising and falling in ragged bursts. I could see the muscles in her shoulders trembling, but she didn't break eye contact. I wiped my eyes on my sleeve and turned back to the cub. Its breathing was a little stronger now. I wrapped it in a second towel, warming a rice pack in the microwave to place alongside it. Anything to keep its temperature up. Anything to keep that tiny heartbeat from stopping. Suddenly, from outside, I heard a loud snapping sound. A branch breaking. Heavy footsteps in the underbrush beyond my clearing. The mother lynx's ears went flat, her head whipping around toward the sound. She pressed her nose to the door again, whining deep in her throat. I moved to the window, peering out into the trees. At first, all I saw were shadows between the trunks. But then I saw movement. 2 men in dark jackets moving between the birches, heading in my direction. My pulse thudded in my throat. I turned back to the little lynx, stroking its tiny head with my thumb. I looked over at the mother lynx. "Don't worry, girl. I'm not letting anyone hurt him. Or you." But as I said it, the fear in my chest turned cold. Because deep down, I wasn't sure if that was a promise I could keep. I pressed my back against the wall, peering through the crack between the curtains. The 2 men moved cautiously among the trees, scanning the ground with rifles slung over their shoulders. For a moment, my chest went cold with fear. But then I saw the orange patches on their jackets. Park rangers. Relief flooded through me so quickly my knees almost gave out. I opened the door a crack. The mother lynx jerked back, ears flat, but I held my hand up to calm her. "Morning," one of the rangers called out when he saw me. His voice was low but carried easily across the clearing. "Didn't mean to startle you, sir. What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped forward, pushing his cap back on his head. "We've had reports of illegal hunters in the area. Some traps were found near the North Trail. Have you seen anyone?" I shook my head. "No, just me out here." His partner stepped closer, frowning. "You sure? We're tracking prints that came this way." Behind me, the little lynx let out a tiny rasping cry from the table. Both men looked past me into the cabin. Before they could take another step, I stepped fully into the doorway, blocking their view. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "Just an injured stray I'm tending to. I used to be a vet." Their eyes narrowed slightly. I could feel the mother lynx's body trembling beside me. Her ears flicked back and forth, picking up every movement. "All right," the first ranger finally said. "Just be careful. If you see anyone suspicious, radio US on Channel 2. And keep your doors locked tonight." I nodded, feeling sweat run down my spine despite the cool morning air. The rangers gave me a polite nod and moved off into the trees, their radios crackling softly as they disappeared among the birches. I closed the door and let out a shaking breath. The mother lynx let out a soft whine, pressing her head against my leg. I knelt down, resting my forehead against hers for a moment. "It's okay. They're gone. But we need to be careful." The day passed slowly. I fed the cub fluids every hour, watching its breathing become steadier, though still weak. The mother never left the porch. She sat there like a silent guardian, her eyes locked on her baby through the window. As evening fell, shadows stretched long across the clearing. I set a small fire in the wood stove, keeping the cabin warm through the dropping spring temperatures. The cub curled against the rice pack, twitching in its sleep. I ate a quick dinner of canned soup, my spoon clinking against the metal pot with each scoop. My nerves were too frayed for real food. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose shingles on the roof. Around midnight, I heard it. The sound of heavy boots crunching over dead leaves. My heart thudded so loud I was sure they could hear it from outside. I killed the lamp and stood in the dark, listening. Voices, hushed and urgent, drifted through the night air. I moved to the window, careful not to make noise. Two men moved through the clearing, their flashlights sweeping over the ground. These were not rangers. Their coats were dark, unmarked, and each carried a rifle slung low. "Blaine," one of them whispered harshly. "Over here. Tracks fresh." I felt the blood drain from my face. They were hunters. Illegal hunters. Bounty men looking for pelts to sell under the table. The mother lynx was pressed flat against the porch floor, her ears pinned back, her tail flicking in quick, sharp jerks. I moved away from the window and grabbed the old revolver I kept in the top drawer. My hands shook as I checked the cylinder. 6 bullets. I'd never fired it at anything living before. The cub whimpered softly from the table. I moved to it, gently placing a hand on its head to calm it. "Stay quiet, little one. Please." Outside, the men moved closer to the house. I heard one of them step onto the porch. The old boards creaked under his weight. The mother lynx let out a low, guttural growl. I heard the man curse softly. "Jesus, look at the size of that thing," he whispered. The other man stepped up beside him, the flashlight's beam cutting through the window. It landed directly on the lynx's face, her eyes glowing bright gold in the dark. I held my breath as one of the men raised his rifle, pointing it straight at her through the glass. I gripped the revolver so tight my knuckles burned. My heart slammed against my ribs as the man outside flicked off the safety on his rifle. The mother lynx growled low, the sound deep and dangerous, vibrating through the porch floor. "Don't shoot," I shouted through the door. "Please, don't shoot." Both men froze. The one aiming his rifle glanced at his partner. "Who the hell are you?" He barked. "I'm just a guy living here. That lynx, she's not yours to take." The man with the rifle laughed, a dry, humorless bark. "It's a wild animal, old man. You planning to keep her as a pet?" His partner shifted uncomfortably, glancing over his shoulder into the trees. "Come on, Blaine, let's just go." Rangers were sniffing around earlier. "We don't need the trouble." Blaine ignored him, keeping the rifle trained on her chest. "That pelt alone is worth over $1,000. And her little one inside, that's easy money." My vision went red at the edges. I stepped forward, shoving the door open so hard it rattled on its hinges. The lynx whipped around, her ears pinned back, eyes wild with fear and rage. "Get off my porch," I growled, raising the revolver with both shaking hands. "Now," Blaine smirked. "You gonna shoot me, Grandpa?" I said, "Get off my porch." For a moment, the world held its breath. Then the mother lynx moved. With a snarl that ripped through the night, she lunged forward, smashing into Blaine's chest with her front paws. The rifle clattered to the porch boards as he screamed, falling backward into his partner. Her teeth sank into the thick sleeve of his coat, shredding it in one savage shake. I raised the revolver, aiming at the sky, and fired. The explosion cracked through the clearing like thunder. Both men scrambled to their feet, terror in their eyes. "Get the hell out of here," I shouted, cocking the hammer again. They didn't wait for a second warning. Blaine grabbed his rifle and ran, blood dripping from his shredded coat. His partner stumbled after him, cursing and glancing over his shoulder at the lynx, who stood tall on the porch, ears flat, tail thrashing, every muscle trembling with adrenaline. I lowered the revolver, my arms shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. My chest heaved with ragged breaths as I stepped forward, placing a hand on her heaving side. "Thank you, girl. You saved both of us tonight." She let out a rough, broken growl that faded into a low whine, pressing her head against my chest. I buried my face in her fur, breathing in the wild, pine-scented warmth of her body. Suddenly, from inside the cabin, I heard a thin, desperate cry. I turned and ran back in. The cub was sprawled on the towel, its breathing fast and shallow, sides heaving like bellows. "No, no, no." I scooped it up in my hands, feeling its tiny body burning with fever. Its gums were pale and sticky. Dehydration. Septic shock. It was crashing. I grabbed my emergency medical kit from under the sink, tearing it open with trembling fingers. Adrenaline roared through my veins as I filled a syringe with antibiotics and glucose solution. The cub's eyes rolled back in its head, its paws twitching weakly. "Stay with me, little one. Stay with me." I injected the fluids under its skin, rubbing its chest briskly to keep the blood moving. The mother lynx appeared at the doorway, her massive frame filling it entirely. Her eyes glowed in the dim light, wide with terror and pleading. I'm trying. I'm trying as hard as I can." The cub let out a thin, broken squeak, its limbs going limp again. Tears blurred my vision as I held it closer to my chest, feeling its tiny heartbeat flutter against my palm. "Don't you die on me now. Not after everything we've been through tonight." Outside, I heard the distant crackle of radios. Rangers were moving through the forest again, searching for the hunters. But all I could hear was the ragged, fading breathing of the little lynx pressed against my heart. I paced the kitchen, my heart racing so hard it felt like it would tear out of my chest. The little lynx was fading fast. Its breathing came in ragged, shallow gasps, its gums pale and tacky. I knew the fluids I had weren't enough. It needed stronger antibiotics, and it needed them now. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 3 in the morning. The nearest town with an all-night pharmacy was 30 miles away, down winding mountain roads. I looked at the mother lynx, her eyes wide with terror as she watched her cub twitch weakly on the table. "I can't just let him die," I whispered to her. I grabbed my jacket off the hook, shoving my wallet into the pocket. "Stay here. Watch over him. I'll be back." She let out a soft, broken whine as I slipped out the door. The night air was sharp and cold against my flushed skin. I ran to the old pickup, my boots crunching over gravel, and climbed in, turning the key. The engine sputtered once, twice, before roaring to life. I didn't wait for it to warm up. I threw it into gear and sped down the dirt driveway, headlights cutting through the dark like twin knives. The road twisted and curved through the black pine forest, shadows flickering across the windshield. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Every minute felt like an hour. Images of the cub's tiny body flashed through my mind. The way its paws twitched, the glazed look in its eyes. I pressed harder on the gas. Finally, I pulled into the small pharmacy lot, tires screeching against the cracked pavement. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I stumbled inside. The pharmacist, an older woman with silver hair pulled back in a bun, looked up in shock. "Please," I gasped, leaning against the counter. "I need broad-spectrum antibiotics. Amoxicillin or Baytril. Anything for a kitten under 2 pounds." Her eyes softened as she took in my trembling hands and wild eyes. "Emergency?" "Yeah, please. He won't make it till morning." She didn't ask any more questions. Moving quickly, she filled a small vial with liquid antibiotic and placed it in a paper bag, along with syringes and dosing instructions. "Good luck," she said softly as I handed her my card. I nodded, too choked up to speak. I ran back to the truck and peeled out of the lot, the bag clutched in my shaking hands. The drive back felt endless. Dawn was beginning to lighten the sky with pale silver streaks by the time I turned onto my driveway. I parked crooked near the porch and sprinted inside. The cub lay limp on the table, its breathing so faint I had to press my ear to its chest to hear it. The mother lynx sat beside the table, her head resting on the wood, eyes half closed in silent grief. "No, not yet." I ripped the cap off the antibiotic and drew up a dose into the syringe, my hands trembling so badly I nearly bent the needle. I injected it under the loose skin of the cub's neck, massaging the area gently. "Come on, little fighter. Come on." The mother lynx lifted her head, her ears twitching forward. I placed my hands on either side of the cub's tiny chest, feeling its ribcage rise and fall. One breath, another, then a pause so long my heart stopped. Finally, it took a shuddering gasp and let out a thin, kitten-like squeak. Tears filled my eyes as I let out a shaky laugh. "That's it. That's my brave little guy." For the next hour, I sat there with him, feeding him small drops of warm glucose water every few minutes. As the sun rose higher, golden light streamed through the kitchen window, turning the room into a glowing sanctuary. The cub's breathing grew steadier. Its paws twitched less violently. Its eyes fluttered open for a moment, unfocused but alive. The mother lynx moved closer, placing her massive paw gently against my arm. I looked into her eyes and saw something there that took my breath away. Understanding. Gratitude. Trust. "You did it," I whispered, stroking her cheek. "You brought him to me. You saved him." She pressed her nose against my forehead, her whiskers tickling my skin. For a moment, I let myself rest my head against hers, feeling the warmth and weight of her presence. Outside, Birds were beginning to sing in the birch trees, their calls sweet and bright in the cold morning air. As the sun climbed higher, she turned back to her cub. He let out a tiny squeak as she picked him up gently in her jaws, holding him close to her chest. I stood and stepped back, giving her space. She looked at me one last time. Her golden eyes locked onto mine, saying everything words never could. Then, with silent grace, she turned and walked out the door, her cub cradled against her. I stepped onto the porch, watching her as she moved across the clearing. The early morning light painted her fur in soft golds and reds. At the edge of the forest, she paused and looked back at me one last time before disappearing into the trees. I stood there for a long time, the cool breeze brushing against my face, listening to the forest come alive around me. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't wipe them away. Sometimes love isn't about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go. And in that quiet, golden morning, with the pine trees whispering overhead, I felt something deep inside me finally begin to heal.